Then what?
Quality, quantity, and variety.
ROCKFLUX.
Let's get this show on the road.
It's an excursion into the odd and into the very, very different.
Good morning.
Well, that's it without any fanfare. And in the true sense of the word fanfare. And if it looks like I'm all bundled up, and now I realize I'm like starting to sweat. But when I first came down here, I was freezing. So I put this hoodie on, the Then What hoodie, which is should have seen earlier on as the show began. And trying to position myself. I worked my ass off yesterday. Like the title says, what I did instead of watching war, in quotation marks, coverage and commentary, the morning show. And I figure you know who I am, right?
You're listening to Tony Caravan Live.
Yeah, my back's in pain, so I don't know if it's from being bent over for like a couple hours trying to patch this floor. Here's what it looked like before that. I have a little picture here. It may not look much different. Did I bring the... Yeah, that's the right one out. This is the area that's focused on the title card. You could see how there was like, if you look in the upper left quadrant of this, you can see how I pulled out some with spray foam. There used to be a container, like a cat litter container here that was filling up with water, but there was water getting underneath, and it seems to me that because it was pooling even towards the front, and there was kind of a gully down that way, I don't think the water could have been coming in from that place. I think the water was going down that way, and that's how it was ended up flooding into my room. If I'm incorrect, the situation could be out of control when next time it rains, because if I plug the hole and I'm going to force the entire everything down, but I still have a theory. Anyway, so I tried to build that area up. Now, this is for regular show listeners. And so I put some of these old tiles I had. But if you look in the right quadrant now, you see the left quadrant is patched. The right, and I added a second tile to like raise the floor up to a level with the other part, even though it's a mishmash and patch job. But you can see that on the right quadrant, I should have added some more scraps of that floor tile to, equalize that, and then cover it with caulking. See, my problem is the caulking takes 24 hours to set up, so I'm hoping when I go up today it's going to be set up, which means I could put some of that spray rubber and some of that tape, put the thing back in position and tape it up. But if I were to try to patch that corner, it takes 72 hours to be waterproof, water ready. All right? Boy, I'll tell you, these hoodies are really warm. I put this thing on because I was like freezing, and now I'm hot. The heat came on, and I'm drinking hot coffee. So the saga will continue, so I'm going to try to build that out with something, and maybe I'll just put some liquid nails under it. Man, but I really would like to, if I was going to do that, to fill the gaps with some tub and tile waterproof caulking, and then put the thing over top of that. Son of a. Yeah, it takes 72 hours to be really waterproofed, so-called, right? But it will dry up good enough to be painted over. And I have one can of that spray rubber, and I was going to give this a little spray rubber coating, and then I was going to let that dry, and then I was going to place the pan where it was, and then put this rubberized tape around the edges and top of the pan, and some other areas of the floor and see if I can't seal this up for good. But I may just have to put some tape in that area there and accept the fact that it's going to be a little bit... Nothing should get under the tape if I do it right. Son of a... You know? You just... Oh, no! I know. Good morning! Oh, good morning. I didn't think. Because I was in pain. And then after that, and I don't have photos of it, and we'll wait until a little bit later on because the gardening aspect of this program, I should say, is not coming for a while, you know. But yeah, this upstairs.
This is a nightmare. It must be a nightmare.
All right, here's what I did with my coffee today. It's 100% Colombian coffee, and I put a little tiny square of 100% cacao, you know, the stuff they make chocolate out of, and a dash of pure vanilla extract. I was watching some guy who was trying to make like a non-dairy or a smoothie or some kind of health thing, like, because the guy's against dairy and carbs and all kinds of weird things. But I wanted 85% cacao, or however you pronounce that. CACAO, cacao, right? But all I had was 65 and 100, so I put the 100 in today. So, you know, it's one of those days. So now I'm sweating. My coffee's like blah. It tastes like chocolate. Like it tastes like kind of a thick chocolate, but not sweet, not like cocoa. But what the heck? I mean, there's nothing I could do to it but add like sugar or something, and I'm just not going to do that because I just had a cereal with berries. And I'm actually trying to phase out, you know, there's so many sugars in everything these days that I'm just trying. You can see a one flashing light in camera 2 if you look up towards camera 2 there. Well, actually, if you look really closely, there's a rail there. You could see them flashing. We had a lot of sunshine yesterday, even though the weather's been cold. In fact, let me check to see what my update in my weather area here is supposed to be like. It takes a while it's 30 degrees outside according to this. It was originally supposed to be sunny today. Now it's partly cloudy, with some sun. They're not showing any rain, but then again, yesterday was supposed to be all sunny, and then I think there were some flurries, snow flurries. So the weather, whatever's going on with weather meteorologists is the thing. Forget about it. Has nothing to do with the weather. It's that meteorologists, with all this high-tech equipment and stuff, and whatever they're doing when they're going to school, because they go to school to learn this stuff. I mean, in other words, they're telling me that they can't have the ability, even with radar. I mean, you can see clouds physically, you know, visibly, that they can't tell what the weather's going to be in a couple hours. Like I've said this many times, I could understand longer term forecasting, or even forecasting, you know, a weekend ahead or something, even a couple days ahead. But the same day, I mean, every week I think there's at least one or 2 days where they got the day wrong, right? You know, it's almost like you have the weather on, you're finishing up your breakfast, and and the weather person's saying, don't forget to bring your umbrella. It's raining cats and dogs out there. So you grab your umbrella, open your door, and the sun's shining and the birds are chirping. And it never rains that day. I mean, that's pretty much not an exaggeration. So here we are. I imagine, and I'm eating and drinking hot coffee, hot, thick cocoa. I thought the splash of vanilla extract would like kind of add a sweetening to it without adding sugar. But I was wrong. I have no choice. I mean, there's nothing I could put in there. I don't put cream in my coffee, and I don't keep that stuff. So that cacao stuff is good for your heart. Coffee supposedly good for your bile. And then I got to watch. I have my white Then What shirt on. You can see a little bit of it there. And I don't want to get, coffee stains on this thing. But I had to put it on. It was like the warmest thing I had in this front studio room. I've only worn this a couple times. I've worn it out a few times. I've worn it for a show a couple of times, but that's about it. Half dozen times. Most. So, what does a person talk about? This might seem unusual for someone just tuning in who's never seen this show before. A YouTuber, and I glanced at YouTube, and we could do that together here really quickly, just the first page. Of course, every time I want to show you what I did see, it always seems to have drastically changed, in that short period of time from when I began the show. Let's see. Well, it has me down as being live, and next to that is live webcams from around Ukraine, of course. Here we go. Let's go down further. There's Ukraine crisis, nuclear war simulation. Imagine that. Ukraine live camera, again, a different version. Putin alerts nuclear forces on high alert. War in Ukraine. Putin puts nuclear forces on high alert again. Putin puts nuclear forces on alert. See, that's breaking news from Reuters, Fox, CBS, and WGN. So an independent, a national network, a big cable station, and a news organization all have basically the same thing. So they're scaring people that there's going to be a nuclear war. And in the upper left-hand corner, more Aconcagua 06, 3,000 views. That's Adverteria. That's my old advertising company. So that was the account. So I used to get like 3,000 views for stuff. 15 years ago, we're looking at over here. This is a video. That's a guy named John Greiber. Also on that expedition, that's Doug Staup. He was the head. And somewhere in the background in that tent would also be the guy who was the Bachelor from the TV show. He was on that expedition too. That's one of mine. 15 years ago. Look at that. Crazy. But anyway, that's just out of curiosity. My quote in the chat that I put up first was, focus on the things you can change, or better yet, affect positive change. And that's why I'm not going to get into this thing. But as you can see, the media has escalated this to nuclear war. And Biden is like trying to draw attention away and nominating a Supreme Court justice and stuff. He couldn't have waited a week or two on that. He should have been on that so-called hotline, the bat line to Putin. Right? So I like I said, you won't get me pressing on any of those. And I didn't yesterday. I didn't click on anything about anybody talking about that kind of thing. So this is what I did instead of watching the war coverage. And today I'll be up there after the show. I'll watch this show. Oh, there was just a quick show note. If you watched yesterday's show, apparently, as far as I know, they didn't take down that Unify video, which was nice. So if you got to see it, and the audio quality was fairly decent in the playback. That was yesterday. I have no idea today. We could double check that too. Let's do that while we're here, because I don't want to say something and then find myself being a hypocrite. It's not really the right word, but you know what I'm saying. I have to go to my videos. YouTube Creator Studio. I don't know if you can go to the same thing at the same time, but let's just make sure the video's up. Copyright claim. Let's see what they did. Channel impact. Not affected. Public, everyone can see it. Ineligible for whatever. Let's see. Content used, Come As You Are, playing Nirvana. Content found, Doreen. Copyright owners, In Grooves, whoever that is. See, they want you to possibly trim it out, but apparently they haven't. Video can't be monetized. So in other words, you probably saw a commercial on that if you watched that yesterday. But anyway, that at least, you know, it's not like I forgot to look how many views I had on that video. I'm not going to go back. That kind of messes with the CPU and connection. But at the end of the video, I was talking about 8 billion people, and I was saying how pathetic it was, how few people were watching that on YouTube. And I said only 7 billion. I meant to say 7,000. It was like 8,000 subscribers they had. Out of 8 billion or 2 billion active YouTube users, this thing, you know, this unity thing, unify, or, you know, movement, you know, this idea of peace, and people were meditating. I actually sat and watched the thing, and some guy was focusing people on, you know, just concentrate on, you know, peace. And remember, don't take sides on things like this, on both sides. And also remember, you don't have to be a religious person to pray or some kind of spiritual person to meditate. The idea is anytime remember I was talking about yesterday, energy creates matter. I mean, that's the basic law of, you know, of the universe, of physics, of everything, right? The Big Bang Theory is energy, and suddenly all this matter is in existence, right? You know, or if you want to say God created man, the Word was made flesh, right? Basically energy, you know, any way you want to look at it, right? But however you view life, the same goes for intention. And so it's the idea of focusing, you know, if you want to focus on something, you know, that's energy. That's like the Word. That's why all this name calling and this back and forth and this divisiveness is wrong, because it's bad. When people say bad vibes, people like think, oh, you're some kind of like hippie character or something. It's like, no, it's real. You know, even in quantum physics, you know, they talk about, you know, string theory, you know, vibrations and all that stuff. I mean, this stuff is all, you know, gone from, you know, hundreds of years ago, if not thousands and thousands of years ago, people talking about this kind of thing, to where it's been now studied in labs, you know, under a microscope, under, you know, electron microscopes or better, or the Great Hadron Collider, which is kind of a scary device. There's a lot of weird stuff about that. You know, I mean, I've semi-looked into that, but I mean, that's a freaky thing when you think about it. And the complexity of it. Like, what are they really doing with that thing? Really, really. But it's still energy equals, you know, matter. And the point of the matter is your thoughts, you know, and that's this whole idea of intention and whatnot. And so positive thinking. And don't be divisive. In other words, the idea of this guy was, who I was watching yesterday, because like I said, I'm not going to watch war stuff. But I was curious about the Unity stuff, and there was only 2 people watching on YouTube. But apparently they had a bunch of people carrying the broadcast on Facebook and they have other outlets. And they run Zoom too, I think. But still, in the aggregate, considering, you would expect something like that to have been in the hundreds of thousands at least, if not millions, on a planet of 8 billion people. And the idea that with 2 billion active users on YouTube, that there were 2 watching when I turned on. So I was one of them. So there was only 1 watching. One of them might have been that guy himself, because sometimes what people will do is they'll be broadcasting from their computer, and they'll have their cell phone or something to watch to see if they're live. It gets to be annoying after a while. Am I live yet? Am I live yet? And they don't realize I go through it every morning, but I don't say that because I know there's a delay, built into the system. It's just like when you turn it on, you're on. Don't wait for, to see it. There's a delay. It's just a built-in delay, especially on YouTube. But what I was trying to say is that, so I sat there in my chair and I just focused on it. And the idea was, I was trying to get at, just to end this, is that he was saying, in his so-called meditation, but like I say, anything is a meditation. Anytime you're thinking good of somebody, right? Wishing well, right? If you're, in the old days, if you're writing out a birthday card for somebody, or better yet, be more specific, get well card, right? Or you send somebody some flowers with a little get well wishes on a note card, if somebody's in a hospital or something like that, or sick at home. And it's the same thing, so that's meditation, that's prayer in its most simple, basic form. And this isn't a religious or spiritual show in that regard, but I'm just saying that if more people would be positive, and what he did was he said for the people in Ukraine and for the Russian people. And he could have expounded it on it and expanded it, as the word I was originally wanted to say, expanded it to include everybody around the world, particularly those glued to their television sets. So think positive and wish well to people. So what, you disagree with somebody? We're all human beings on this planet. And I know that's boring for people, and it's like, turn off the TV, turn off the YouTube channel, guys talking, Anyway, frustrating. But I mean, it's like, as hard as, look at my life, how as hard as this is, and this trials and tribulations I'm going through. I mean, look at that mess. And you'll say, well, if you knew how to do it the right way, it wouldn't look like that. Well, the point is, I know how to do it the right way, but what you're looking at is emergency patches, during, in between deluges with various, alleged advertised products that claim you can either spray or put something on even in damp conditions, me trying to stop water from getting down to my second floor, particularly to my bedroom. So actually what I did yesterday, it looks a lot cleaner and nicer. And when I'm finished with it, this will look pretty good. You could see under there some tongue and groove. And I mean, what a nightmare. Like a turkey roasting pan off over to the left to capture water. But, there are people living way worse than that. Way worse. So, but you just, this is the human condition, the struggle of life. And there's no such thing as, people as equality and fairness. Just doesn't work that way, right? You know what I mean? It just doesn't work that way. It would be nice, it would be ideal, but it doesn't. Look at a handicapped person. What did they do wrong? Right? Or someone that's, is involved in an accident, or, or someone in a war or zone, or anything like that. Somebody, it doesn't matter. Somebody who catches an illness, a disease. It's like, what did they do wrong? Right? Nothing. It's the struggle of life. You do what you got to do and you get by. You try to keep positive as possible and keep moving on and wish well for others. I mean, some people believe in this karma and, and all that stuff, but I've seen a lot of very good people do very good things. And probably if I were a karma type of person, I would say, man, that person has great karma, but it's like, and their life is a tragedy. So the takeaway from that is not to think, if you're a karma type of person that thinks, well, okay, if I do good and it'll come back to me and all that stuff. Well, that's fine. Do that. I'm saying everybody should just do good and have good, positive thinking and positive thoughts. And that energy creates matter and intention and, and good vibes. And so to sit around getting depressed or watching all this stuff and then getting like, oh, those damn Ruskies and, well, Russia's just trying to defend himself from NATO, who's trying to put all these weapons on his border, nukes. Whatever you want to say about this thing, and there are people who have all these different things, I've heard them all, years ago, because this is no surprise. This under Obama, this was happening. Remember, Biden was the point man on this, on Ukraine back then, but instead his son ended up getting like a job working for an oil company, and, I don't want to go down that road. Just that, things happen. I guess that, they were afraid to do it under the last guy because they were afraid he might have head them off at the pass. So, yeah, that's what I did yesterday. I didn't watch war coverage. The only thing I did was spend a few moments with some positive thoughts for everyone on both sides. And then I moved out to the backyard because I have these trees, and I have this neighbor who's obsessed. Somehow she's become obsessed with greenery. We're on a planet, in other words, we're placed on a planet that has life on it, besides us. And like the predominant form of life actually is like bacteria, fungi, that communicates with plants, trees, right? All that sort of thing. It's like people who say CO2 bad. It's like it's what plants breathe. It's what gives us crops, and in turn, the plants and the trees give us oxygen. But that's an argument for another day. Anyway, so this neighbor, I got like about a 7-foot fence. At one point, I have it up to about 8 foot. It's towards the back where I like to sit down when I'm done working, sit in the sun. It's a warm spot, and soak up my vitamin D. The older you get, the longer you need to be in the sun to get vitamin D at the optimum time. And the darker you get, which is weird, or if you're dark skinned to begin with, but as you get a tan and stuff, then you even have to be in there longer. But the point is, you don't want to sunburn, okay? So you need to talk to a doctor about it. But I did find an app called D, the letter D, as in vitamin D, D-Minder, as in mind, Minder, D-Minder. And some doctor came up with that. And it's an app you could get on your phone. And what it does is it tracks the sun. You put in like your location, where you are, and you put in a couple basic things about, I don't know if you put in your skin tone, or if you don't do that, you might put in your age or something, at least something that gives it or whatever. But anyway, what it does is it tells you when the sun is going to be at such and such an angle in the sky, and when optimal, vitamin D is going to be gleaned from that sun, and how long you need to be out in it in order to get your daily dose of vitamin D. And this would be during, late spring, to early fall. Because basically fall through winter into early spring, it could be a sunny day and you're out there and you think, oh, sun feels good on my face. You're not getting any vitamin D. I was out for like 2 hours yesterday. When I first came in, there was a little bit of red by my cheeks and stuff. But that just faded instantly. I mean, that was no vitamin D. That was just, probably was windburn. It was windy as heck. But anyway, this woman, I'm going to have to take this hoodie off. So I'll be right back. This will just take a second. I have an extra shirt right over there. Yeah, it's nuts. It's like I'm so gone from like hot to cold, cold to hot. Whew. So weird how a person looks without glasses when you see them with glasses. Like they look like strange or something. I don't even need this wool hat to tell you the truth. But it keeps my ears from getting like messed up. Now I messed up my chair. So I messed up. But these are little problems compared to other people. Those muscles. Well, anyway, so what I had to do was, this tree is growing. I have two little trees. I have a little maple tree that I grew from a sapling. It's now about, it got to be about 10 feet tall. So I took that down to about 6 feet because I just want it, it's not too far from my bird's nest. So I just want it to be, I'm trying to like grow it. Like I already trimmed my apple trees. I was smart enough to do that like weeks ago. Because I noticed when I was doing this maple tree, there was sap already coming up in that. See, I guess that's like people who collect maple. This might be the time. I don't know if this is when they do it or not. But I think it'll survive. And next to it is, I thought it was like a mulberry tree or something, if there is such a thing. But that tree has got grown like crazy, crazy. And I had to take like the whole top off of it because part of it was going into this woman's yard over the fence. So I took that thing down to about maybe 10 feet on my side. And I'll go with a pruner. I may do it today or sometime within the next 2 weeks. Just before springtime, before the weather you start getting consecutive warm days. I mean, we're still down in the freezing thing. So most of the sap in trees should be staying down as close to in the ground as possible, close to the root ball or root base, whatever. So I went out there, but the point is, I also had these grapevines that had grown onto this tree. So it was this like, I'm talking about piles when I started cutting these limbs off. And the limbs, it's not that they were that big. They were only about so wide. The widest were this, and most were just tiny ones. But I got a pile of wood, and this is just a weird thing. Like, if you have a yard, like, this is the little survivalist thing. That I got a nice pile of twigs, which are mostly like kindling type. And then I'm starting to get a stack of some of these thicker branch boards, which can be probably, currently they're probably about as wide, if I can get my hands right, as wide as this screen, if you're looking at a fairly decent sized thing, TV even. But eventually I would just cut them into pieces that would be like so big. And then so wide. And the idea is that let them dry out this summer, assuming that the fit doesn't hit the shan. But, getting into next year, all bets are off. Like I say, 18 months, once we hit 18 months from now, from January, say even from this past January, all bets are off. All bets are off. I don't see, forget about this thing that I'm not watching and we're not covering, that thing will be over soon. Okay. And if somebody's thinking of hiding in some bunker or something stupid like that, if there's it's not going to be a nuclear war. If there were a nuclear war, it's all over anyway, so it doesn't matter. That's the same as I try to tell people all the time. If Carrington event happens, I talked about that yesterday. If another one of those, we get the big solar outburst, CME, solar flare, or worse yet, the thing they're predicting, where the outer shell comes and it's like a near extinction event. I mean, that's pretty much it. That's end of story. Those who survive and survived in the past survived by chance. It's if you look at some of the ancient American people, the before people, so to speak. But remember, nobody's really in North America. To be a native, you can't be a native North American or whatever, but particularly North American, because North America was covered with a sheet of ice like 10,000 plus years ago. So everything was like, there was nobody here. There was nobody alive. Everybody was focused down in Central and South America. But there is a claim and stories, and they're passed down from various chieftains, shamans, and those type of folk, that tell these stories by the campfire, pass down things from one generation to the next. They talk about the ant people, they talk about all kinds of different people, right? Giants. Anyway, people who saved them or took them down under the earth. And they say then their people rose from the earth, right? Came from the earth. And, there's this unbelievable network of caves. And if you even look, like even below the Grand Canyon and stuff, and there are so many unexplored caves that go underneath the earth that, as long as you're not near some sort of area where magma is flowing, has some path upward, some, at least at this moment in time, some geologically sound area, right? That's not subject to, earthquake activity or volcanism, right? And there are caves that go on for miles and miles and miles and miles. But the weirdest thing about some of these stories, and like I say, with anything you don't see firsthand or have been there firsthand. But this one guy was showing some pictures and stuff, and some other people were talking. These people who worked for government contractors, now older men, and so they tell these stories and stuff. I guess they're NDA non-disclosure agreements were like for 50 years, and they signed them when they were in their 20s or 30s, and now they're in their 80s. And so, yeah, it's like the Kennedy archives, originally it was like for 50 years, they weren't supposed to open it. That was usually a figure they would put on stuff like that, 50 years. So I guess they figured this would be the future, that it wouldn't matter. So anyway, you get a lot of these guys in their late 70s and stuff coming out in their 80s, and they say, I used to work for such and such a defense contractor, or I worked for the military in such and such a year. And the guy's still, totally, full of faculties, living in a house, whatever. And he has his degrees on the wall, and, can show you his, references, and in the military, his uniform, and, all that stuff, discharge papers. But this one guy I was watching a little bit of, like I said, because I haven't and I will not watch any of this nonsense coverage. I'm sorry. Like I said before, in the 21st century, 50 million Americans died of diseases unnecessarily, I believe. And over 2 million people were murdered in the U.S., most of which went unsolved. And so we're looking at some war over there. It's horrific and horrible, and whatever side you want to take or whatever you want to look at it. But the point of the matter is, if we would have been focusing on things like not having those 50 million Americans die of these various diseases, or these several million murders, that doesn't include the rapes, assaults, and everything else. And this stuff continues to this day. Every weekend this is going on. Chicago, Detroit, New York, Philadelphia, L.A. You name a city, major city, and there's like murders. So forget about that. So I'm watching this other stuff. So this guy's saying, he's showing this place. The one guy took a helicopter down into the Grand Canyon because he wanted to explore some of this stuff. Some of these caves that he heard of from some of these, Native Americans who had this story passed down. And they were saying that there were caves, and that's what... And he showed this place like where NASA has closed off a portion in this one area of the Grand Canyon, and have like materiel and people there, and it's a no-go zone. NASA. And the NASA logo's there. Like, in other words, they've basically like taken over this spot. But this is like down in the Grand Canyon. And then there's these other locations that are fenced off, and it's like government property, no trespassing. And there's people who have got photos of this heavy equipment being like, going in there, tunnel coring type machines and stuff. And then, of course, everybody knows, unless you've been living under a rock, pun intended, about these sounds, these booms, and these stuff that have been heard all over the country, and they always, and you can see, people have pieced together these various newscasts from around all over the U.S. And it's like, it makes the news, and all the neighbors and people in the city, and they all say they're unexplained, and we contacted the military. They said it wasn't them. There was no testing going on. We contacted the USGS, and they claimed that there was no earthquakes or anything of that sort in the area. And then end of story, and then they move on to, here's a nice thing. There's a fair downtown this weekend. So it's like somebody, I don't forget who leaked it out, but it was one of these billionaire type of guys who was sitting in an interview, and he was talking about this kind of stuff. And he goes, something to the effect of the elite think they're going to hide out in their bunkers when these, when one of these events occurs. And that's exactly what's going on. First of all, they've already shown you a couple of those places that we know exist, right? There's a one I think you can take a tour of, that one outside of D.C. That's like the one that's been public for decades. But, we know about all these other places, right? they're not hiding it. Cheyenne Mountain, is that one of them or something? It's there. It's a military base, but you can see that it goes down, and then there's these big doors, and well, you don't get beyond you can only see from the fence that that's what's going. There's some underground military, thing going on there. But that's their defense. These headquarters, defensive nuclear type headquarters. What I'm talking about, it's starting to taste better a little bit, I think. So I don't know. Maybe I'm getting used to the taste, but that taste there was a little more chocolatey. So I don't know. So, basically, like I say, the ancient people who did survive the last one were in caves under the earth. And like I say, you can go, and that's really the only place to survive. And that's assuming that cave doesn't get a deluge. In other words, if you got a hole in the earth and there's water, well, it's like a bathtub drain, right? So you're just going to drown underground. That's why for you and me to build some kind of bunker in our backyard is a joke. It's when you're talking about mile-high floods and earthquakes, and and not knowing, because like in the center part of the U.S., center to east, like Mississippi type, you have that New Madrid fault, which did go off in colonial times or post-colonial times. Maybe it was even no, I think it was at one point. There were basically colonists were here at that point, or, but there were no buildings or anything, but it was like major shaking going on, And we've seen various, quakes, even along the eastern seaboard in different areas. So it's like, we don't know what's safe. And there's a lot of mines and stuff in the Northeast, like in places like, coal mines in West Virginia, Pennsylvania, Ohio, and all that kind of stuff. So you don't know. And of course, everything out west, I mean, that's like from, between Yellowstone, which is the scariest one, but, then you have all the fault lines out in the Pacific, the south, well, not south, just the West Coast, north to south. So it's the idea of somewhere in some zone, maybe there were some groups that survived in some kind of tunnels, and they lived underground, for, they would have to have done it for like a generation or two, because what happens is so cataclysmic, and then it's like a freezing over that it could take 100 years or something like that. And then depending on whether or not the earth does a flip-flop or anything weird like that on its axis, then, if in the equatorial regions might be safer, but it would still be some kind of cave thing or something like that. Like some people I've often heard on some of these shows, like, where did all these people go? It looked like this city had hundreds of thousands of people in ancient times, or, well, they might have just been washed out to sea, or they went underground and then they scattered, or that was like I said in another show, it might have been a refugee area. And so their population swelled to 1 million people at one point. And then after, in time over the years, then they spread to, not the four corners of the earth, but the four corners of the continent. And that's how all these legends are similar among all the peoples. So even tribes that didn't get along, Native American tribes in the U.S. all have these similar stories. But remember, they were warring among themselves even when the British first came here. Right? So, but they still had the same stories. So at one time they were kind of one people, seeking refuge in some place, perhaps. Like I say, this is just talk. Who knows? But that's what I did instead of watching war coverage, is watching interesting stuff like that. Just stuff to think about, contemplate. Because these are the real times we're into. And like I say, there is no, in a worst case scenario, that's why it always bothers me about people that get caught up on things. Like I always say, don't worry about something that's going to happen, has the potential for happening sometime in the future, distant future, or even the near future. Why spend the time between then and now worrying about it? In other words, live your life. And then at the moment, and at the right time, deal with it. That's not to say to not be prepared or to just live some happy-go-lucky life and not care about anything. I'm saying, it's bad enough that we live stressful lives and life's a struggle, right? But to let alone add more stress to your life is ridiculous, because stress kills and causes all kinds of chemicals in your body, that just cause inflammation and disease and stuff. So, that's where my head's at, So I will be later today going back at it up there. Not looking forward to it. And I don't know if I will go back outside. And what I have is I have 2 grapevines. And grapevines grow like crazy, like most vines do. But they're thick, But it's really good wood, it would be perfect for the grill. Forget about buying charcoal and stuff like that. Like I say, if you're going to cook, use a grill or a fire pit or something, you just get a top for it, which you can get anywhere. I have one. I bought one. Like even a replacement top for a grill. You just buy the replacement top. Build yourself a fire pit and But, just set a fire with wood, and you don't need big logs. And, when that gets heated up to where it's starting to generate heat, but it's not like flaming like crazy or anything, then just put a pot or, pot or pan on the top of it. So you're not getting exposed to any of the carcinogens or anything that's, in the wood or whatever. In other words, you can make a bowl of soup outside, if the fit hits the shan, if the power goes out and you don't have a gas. See, if you have a gas stove, have a gas stove with an electric starter, which that thing, it's like click, 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 click. Sometimes it takes 6 times before it lights the frickin' flame. And it's new or newer. I bought it new when I got this house because there was one. There was no stove. But when the power went out, I just turned on the gas, and because that's an electric starter, and I just lit a match, and the gas came on. So the gas is still flowing through the pipes. And remember, the gas lines, as bad shape as they are, because some of them have been down there for like over 100 years. But it's like they're not driven by any force. It's the pressure of the gas itself. So if you have a gas stove, you're fine. You could just cook, wait till the power comes back on, right? Listen to a battery radio, or if you have a power backup type of thing or something like that. Light a candle if need be. And cook yourself a meal on the stove, right? And if it powers out longer, obviously you make the sensible thing to do is to eat the disposable things first. So whatever's in your refrigerator that could go bad, cook that. If it has to be cooked. If it doesn't have to be cooked, just don't open the refrigerator door. I always keep like a tray of ice cubes. Like I constantly take like the ice cube tray and dump it into a bigger container. It holds a lot of ice cubes. And so in that instance, I would just take a couple of bags of ice and put them in my refrigerator. And I'd have it all strategically planned so that door opens real quick. I mean, if it's a summertime. If it's a wintertime, it doesn't even matter. Out in my garage, I have a cooler. So you could just put a cooler out in your back porch or your backyard and use it as your refrigerator. So even if it goes down to freezing, it's just going to act like a refrigerator. Chances are things won't freeze in it, but then again, things aren't going to thaw, fast. But there's all sorts of things like that, under normal circumstances and just weird, temporary things. So yeah, don't worry about Putin and nuclear war. This fear porn and fear mongering, you got to have positive vibes, positive thoughts, think positive. You can't change it. It's a socioeconomic, geopolitical, activity. It's not a laughable matter because people are dying. But like I say, there's more people dying in the U.S. on a daily basis than during that war. And in other countries around the world, there's more people dying in other countries. There's probably more people dying in the continent of Africa from violence and things like that than what's going on there. It's just that the media won't cover it. And they try to pretend that they care about people of color or different ethnic and cultural, cultures and stuff. They don't. No. They won't show you what's going on in some of those countries down there. It's the same with South America. There's tragedies unfolding daily down there. People dying, being killed. It's weird. Some areas have gone into the barter system. They don't even have that's how bad it is. And same with parts of Southeast Asia. People know very little about that. Anyway, since I've been getting these, copyright hits, I might as well get some on my own songs. So I'm going to play a couple of my songs. I got to take a quick break. I'll be back. 2 shakes of a lamb's tail. But here's some music to listen to while that happens.
There's a war being fought by people on the fringes of society. The ones that the system worked too well on. They're desperate and obsessed with the various causes. But apathy still rules the masses. They're addicted to memes and headlines and posts. 21st century news junkies glued to the media. And like in a game, they've all picked their sides. But it's a game that never ends. It's a backlash from the attempt to create a homogeneous culture. A cry to hold on to one's individuality. A purpose in life in a dehumanized world. An exercise in futility for the open-minded. It's an endless struggle where there's no resistance. But first you have to free your mind. It's not about social injustice or gender bending or any of that stuff. Neither is it about politics. That's just the packaging. It's about trying to find a place in a world gone mad, to feel human and find completion, both physically and spiritually, to break free of the shackles of the corporatocracy, to know what it's like to be alive and part of it all, like those cats in the 60s. It's all about peace and love. There are the little things, like measuring TVs on the diagonal instead of by their width, or the advertised prices that don't include taxes and fees or extra charges. Then there are the lies of omission, where they conveniently forget to mention a very important detail. There are media lies by the newsreaders and reporters who receive fat paychecks from their corporate sponsors. The political lies by the Washington elite who receive millions from lobbyists who really write the laws. The bankers who create money out of thin air and charge you interest and fees for what they get for free. The agent provocateurs who spin and weave tales to create support for their wars for profit. The charitable foundations that keep most of the money they raise and spend very little on the causes they pretend to champion. The con artists and scammers who prey on the innocent, the elderly, and poor, and wage slaves. The people who deceive you and break your heart. Those who are in denial about the real state of affairs and how bad things really are and getting worse by the day. Yeah, they lie, cheat, and steal every day, every way they can. And we choose to ignore them because we have no choice. But I choose to ignore them because I have the choice. For it's still a wonderful world with lots of cool people and creatures and plants. So I just ignore the lies and live my life, paying less and less attention to the liars at large.
She was my previous one. She was literally my last one. The one before her was wild. And before her, a model who more or less used me. There were definitely a few great ones, and the ones that I let get away. But that's all over now, since the cancer. Expecting a love song was a big mistake. Getting a cancer diagnosis is a surrealistic nightmare. Instead of putting things into perspective, it takes your life and puts it in a blender on full speed. I don't know if I'll survive. I know I won't have kids. The dating thing is over.
Oh man, that's a depressing song. I forgot to put that on there. Sorry. I'm back. He's back. For those of you who decided to stay, right?
Quality, quantity, and variety.
ROCKFLUX.
Let's get this show on the road.
All right. So, where was I? Where were we? It's one of those days where there's like just this much left in the coffee. See that little bit, but not enough to fill out the cup. The final cup. So, I don't know. I mean, there's strange things going on all over the place. And, you know, I guess there's always been a lot of people into spiritualism and all kinds of other stuff. And, you know, and how about some of my beat poetry songs? Those were the more beat ones. You know, traditional, like kind of beatnik almost. But, you know, I have other ones, you know, different genres. But to me, it's... I was thinking the other day, because I walked out yesterday, on top of all that stuff yesterday, I took a walk to the grocery store, you know, which is like a mile down or more than that. And, you know, so I got a lot of exercise in yesterday. It's like took off 2 pounds, you know, in one day's work. But I gain pounds back so easily, though. It's so weird. Like if I eat a pasta meal, even if it's like some of these like, you know, like lower carb or veggie type pastas or different types of things like that, it doesn't matter, you know. And same with like I like pastas, you know. And it's not like you're overeating or putting all kinds of crazy stuff in them. You know, everything I eat is healthy. Like I eat pretty healthy. Even this like cacao or, you know, let's just call it like cocoa for the sake of it. But it's 100%. So it's pure. It's basically, you know, it's chocolate minus the sugar, you know, so which has health benefits for you. It's good for the heart. It's good for supposedly, because it's bitter, like ginger and coffee and kale and different things like that. It helps create choline, I think, which is good for bile production, which is, I'm having you know, people know I've had these, I'm trying to homeopathically solve this gallbladder problem. Apparently eggs, lecithin, and cauliflower. So yesterday, and like, I don't know why I wrote brine, but sauerkraut. So yesterday I ate everything. I had a breakfast. Well, I didn't have a breakfast. See, what's killing me right now are these shows, I think. Is that I usually I've got in the habit of having like a bowl of cereal. You know, like there's these people saying don't eat any grains, like grains are bad for you. But high fiber but no grains, and whole grains have problems. This Dr. Gundry or something, if you want to look him up. And I'm really taken back. Like I've always known that things like white flour, white bread, and even wheat flour isn't necessarily the best. But the idea of whole grain oats and things like that, they're certainly non-GMO. They haven't been messed with. But that... Anyway, so I don't know about that. And it's like, this is this eternal struggle that I'm having. And again, gets back to this idea of all these people dying in our country from health and preventable reasons, and that everybody's fixated like zombies on TV watching something. First of all, half those people, sadly enough, are like war pigs. In other words, they're into it, right? They're glued to the TV because they actually enjoy it. I mean, why else would there be so many war pictures, violent, war games, you know what I mean? War movies, you know what I'm talking about? There's a lot of people who are entertained by that. And it's not necessarily the soldiers, right? And certainly not the ones that come back and, like, because of it, they commit suicide or are dealing with broken marriages and even nightmares and stuff like that. People don't understand the real horrors of war when you're when you really are in harm's way. And then when and you have to do what you have to do because that's what you have to do. It's not an option. Okay? And you can't question it. And you don't have time. And it's a split second. And somebody comes over the headset and says, take them out now. You gotta make a moral decision there, So it's not those, so I mean, there's maniacs out there, and a lot of those guys are like gotten into the contracting business, quite frankly. They love it, right? And again, I don't mean to make light of that situation at all. But the idea is that what bothers me more is here at home, more people have died in the 21st century than all the Middle Eastern wars combined. And people are being murdered at ridiculous rates annually. Like nearly 100,000 a year in the U.S. That's murder. That's not the 50 million dying of disease. That, like, a lot of these things are because of what I'm telling you now. No one will tell us. They'll tell you to wash your hands, social distance, and wear a face mask, but they won't tell you what to eat, And so our, mortality rate has dropped by a couple of years recently. And people are dying because they're not telling us, because we're eating poison, basically. It's crazy. And I've gone through this a couple of times too. This is the second time I've gone through this. Because I had like kidney stones, which I guess I get recurrent. Once you have them, you get recurring kidney stones. I think I might have just passed some stones. I hope I did. Kidney stones. Just coincidentally, because I've been on this stone breaker that happens to break any stone. Kidney and gall, supposedly. I don't know if it's doing such a good job on the gallbladder, but I think I had a kidney stone. I'll know today. I had this weird pain the past 2 days, and I haven't felt that today yet. But they talk about not eating. I've been eating a lot of greens, dark greens, and broccoli and different things like that. And so things that are good and healthy for one thing are bad for another. So there's this, the things that cause kidney stones, oxalate, they call it, oxalates, things high in oxalates. This was my nightmare several years ago, before the cancer operation that song, the last song you heard, talked about. So you understand, and I'm still standing here, and I'm still trying to, service to others instead of service to self, and trying to do it. And I'm still it's like, what did I do, And I'm dealing with roofs and my leaks and all kinds of stuff and nutty neighbors. I'm chopping down trees. Yeah, man. Giving me copyright claims for my own songs. So there's no answers, you know? I mean, you could find the answers if you paid for them, but you can't find them on the internet because the internet is broken and the internet contradicts itself. Even the big institutions. Everybody is everyone is a marionette of somebody. Everybody's a puppet of somebody. The media is, and the politicians of the various corporatocracies, right? Let's go through it because I haven't done the litany in several shows. I bring this thing up often. What's the corporatocracy? Big pharma, big tech, big ag, military contractors, the big banking in Wall Street, right? Financiers. Tied into that, but almost separate, would be big real estate, right? Right? And then you have foreign investors like the Communist Chinese Party, which is like runs a big chunk of this country, right? And then big retail, right? That's trying to change, the landscape, destroying our towns, our cities, our downtowns, and all that stuff. And then, and tied in with big tech, of course, would be, all these other groups that like come under that umbrella, various technologies. And then, of course, there's the organized foundations and NGOs and basically, radicals and organizations that, are involved in demonstrations, riots, and things like that, but non-peaceful. People shouting at each other, anger. And so, and you have these people who are looking for a savior, and that's some cult of personality, a political figure who's already been bought and sold by the corporations through campaign financing and campaign donations. So they're beholden to them. And then the media gets these advertisements, right? And if without the advertisements, CNN was on the verge of going down. I have to put another quarter in the can. I said I wasn't going to say those three letters anymore. But they lost their airport contract, I believe, and then they were down to like 100,000. There are people on YouTube getting higher views. And then of course everybody knows that Joe Rogan story where he had 11 million views. And so he had got more views than all the prime cable shows combined. A guy on Spotify, and that's why they went after him. But it's not enough that that's a reality. It's that this is added to it. It's hypocrisy for profit. And so these people are out there trying to, same with this war coverage, they're claiming to have the moral high ground and standards and beliefs, but their own behavior doesn't conform to that. It's all pretense. It's hypocrisy for profit. Like I say, I don't know what the fear porn now about the nuclear war is, but if there's a nuclear holocaust, we're all dead. So don't worry about it. If the sun decides to end the grid, it's going to be the end. All right? It's happened before. It'll happen again. A nuclear holocaust may have happened before, maybe hundreds of thousands of years or maybe 1 million years ago on this planet. We don't know. There's some people who have found evidence of that sort of thing having happened. There are people who have hypotheses about that kind of stuff. But no, you just have to you got to think positive and live positive and do the best you can and just hope for the best. See, the thing is, I've come to realize, I recently purchased a book that, I'm hoping has some answers. I do, these are all my little handwritten notes about sauerkraut, brine, choline. You know what I mean? Like, I try all this stuff. I'm really trying to do the research. Wikipedia changes from narrative to narrative. You know, it's like, it's not an encyclopedia. So you don't have an encyclopedia on the internet unless you go to Britannica, right? And there's a certain part of that is free, but, you know, otherwise a subscription service. So unless you go to a real encyclopedia, go back to the old books, you know, what has really changed that much? You know, as matter of factual things. But the internet itself is useless. I don't care. It could be, you know, forget about WebMD, Healthline, and all those places. They contradict each other. I've done it here on this show so many times, I'm not going to do it again. I've put one in front of the other. One site says, eat this for this problem. This will improve this issue. Another one, don't eat this. It's bad. Okay, well, what am I supposed to do? And that's on the same page. That's like one on top of the other. Then I read something about some study, some medical, you know, related study that appeared in some paper, you know, peer-reviewed paper, about women who ate peanuts or something had such and such percentage of them had, you know, better outcomes regarding gallstones and things like that. But everywhere else I've read, you know, and I got some jar of this 100% peanuts. Do you ever see that stuff? It's not cheap either. Comes in a jar, but the top part of it actually has the oil. I mean, but peanut oil, but I mean, it's not like they put peanut oil in it. In other words, it's just literally peanuts plopped into a you know, a container, and it separates on the shelf. You got to stir it up. So it's peanut butter, you know, it's 100% peanut butter, no additives. And I thought, okay, I'm going to have that on some like whole grain crackers or something if I want to have a little snack or something. And then I remember reading somewhere that I was getting honey. I was always putting like a little honey on my oatmeal in the morning with some blueberries. I mean, how could blueberries not be healthy? They're supposedly heart healthy and all that stuff. But then I'm getting all this other information about, you know, how oversugared we are and how much damage that causes so many things in your body. Then I read, like it says on a gallbladder diet, to eat beans and stuff. And then this other guy saying, well, they contain lectins. And unless you cook them in a pressure cooker or for long hours or something like this, you know, they could eat through the lining of your gut or something. So it's like I told a friend of mine, I said, I have an unopened jar of this 100% peanut butter I'll give you. I already gave away a couple boxes of cereal that were like whole grain oats. And people are watching war and they're advertising what? Apart from, you know, big pharma, and the law firms advertise, you know, it's big pharma's advertising a drug, and then the law firms are advertising a lawsuit against a drug they advertised a year prior or something. But apart from that, they're telling you to eat, you know, go to fast food joints and buy these potato chips, soft drinks, and all these other things that are supposedly like toxic. Right? Basically toxic. Once you reach a certain age. And see, that's the thing. You know, nobody told me. So I had to discover this after I end up in the hospital, you know, whatever, 5-7 years ago, whatever it was, I forget. Could have been 10 the first time I was in. 5 or 7 years, I don't know, 7 years ago. 8. And so I'm trying to get control of myself. Now I eat healthy, and I think anyone who looks at me can tell that I'm not, you know, I don't, you know, I don't look, you know what a sick person looks like. You know what I mean? Their complexion, whatever. I mean, my eyes are white. That's the color of the sepia thing. So, no, I don't have jaundice or anything like that. My teeth are fairly clean, though I have teeth problems. I've had teeth yanked because I had bad dentists when I was a kid who put in metal fillings. And who knows what those things caused to lead to the problems I've had. And so what I'm saying is that, if in the 21st century alone, the past couple decades, close to 50 million people died of preventable, treatable, or perhaps even curable disease, and that a couple of million people are being murdered during that same time, and went unsolved, by the way. Most of them, the majority, they do solve murders. That what are you worried about? You're obsessed with some kind of war coverage and donating money to political candidates who haven't changed any of this. Because we've had Republicans, Democrat in this 21st century. Right? You go back to the 90s, it was Democrat, and then, then a Republican, then Democrat for 8 years, then a Republican for 4 years, and now we got another Democrat. And everything's spiraling downward. And the world is in worse shape than it ever was. There's war going on in Europe. All right? Do you understand? And they're coming out smiling and say, look, I just nominated a black woman to the Supreme Court. It's like, well, hip, hip, hooray, I'm all for that. She's a qualified judge. That's great. We're supposed to be colorblind, right? And why are you announcing that during a war when you should be on the phone with this other guy and trying to create peace? And then you and that woman can have that little celebration a couple of weeks from now when you would have settled that thing. But instead, see, it's diversion. It's something so the media can stop blaming him and they could somehow put it on Trump or something. Or did he do that because they were having CPAC in Florida and they wanted to... Do you understand how cold and calculated these politicians are on both sides? And anytime you give a donation to any kind of political group or politician, all it does is most of it goes to the media, and that money goes to these announcers that basically make tens of millions of dollars, many of them, and who just sit there and who spew and incite hatred and divisiveness. I'm through with politics because I've lived long enough to watch the world just get worse and worse no matter who's in office. And people say, oh, such and such was a better president than this guy, and that guy was a better president. Look, you can nitpick and find things about anybody. All right? But come on. In the overall state of affairs for this country, say, just in an example, but it has to do with the world as well. The world's in as worse condition than we are. We got it way better. But just don't think that we have it that much better, you people listening out there in other parts of the world. Because in this country alone, welcome to America. We're going to get on the bus, get on the plane. We're going to ship you to Detroit or Chicago or to some place or to some small town somewhere where they've got excess money in their welfare system. And we're going to put you in some kind of housing somewhere and wait till you be welcomed by the gang members and dealers there. And you're coming down where you were worried about a drug lord, in Central or South America or Mexico. Well, they're going to throw you in the middle of drug lords in America. See, a lot of Americans are naive. I'm not going to go really super long with this show since I played those songs. A lot of people don't understand that America is kind of the drug capital of the world. We're the big consumers. fentanyl and coke and heroin and all that stuff. And we've got gangs and street gangs and thugs and dealers and low-level dealers, mid-level dealers, kingpins, right? This isn't the days of watching some, movie from the 60s like The Godfather or something where you had the mob controlling everything. Mayor Giuliani, but, Attorney General, I guess he was was he Attorney General then or whatever he was at that point? He prosecuted most of those people. What you have now are a series of gangs, and a lot of those gangs are from down south of the border. And then you have these other gangs that came in from other countries. Triads and all these other kind of things. And those people rule in certain areas and neighborhoods. And that's why these people, they rule over the politicians. And that's why you see these mayors of Chicago and Detroit and places like that. They're not going to, Baltimore. They're not trying to DC. They're not going to try to go up against them. They're scared of them. They're scared of them. They're intimidated by them. And that's only going to get worse. Add that to my, Mad Max dystopian future I talked about yesterday. So when you sit there today and you play armchair general and you opine about this, that, the other because you're on the red team or the blue team or Team Ruski, Team Ukraine, whatever. You think about it. You think about your health and how lucky you are. And if you're sitting there, eating some kind of fast food thing, slugging down some cola, or a certain kind of beer or something like that, good luck, buddy. And, he or she, whatever, whomever, whatever you are. Because, this country, they don't care about you, these politicians. They really don't. It's hypocrisy for profit. And how'd you like to deal with my crap? It's game over, like that hat says down there, and it also says up there. Everything is wrong. I mean, that's clear. And I don't know. It's the beginning of the end one way or the other. But like I say, getting caught up in the worst of things is not really, is insanity. Because if the fit hits the shan, it's over. What you should be more concerned about is this slow creep of dystopia that has been taking over for the past decade or so. Because many people are already living in dystopia. That's the part. There is dystopia in America. All right? It's just that too many people are insulated from it. But you can't remain insulated from it, because it will spread to the suburbs, to your cul-de-sac, all right, to your gated community, to your high-rise apartment. See, because it's coming to a city near you, coming to a neighborhood near you. And now, I don't mean to laugh or make fun of it, but I'm just telling you. And you got to wake up, and you just sitting there watching war, right? These people, what do these announcers know? They know nothing, and they bring on some ex-generals. Half those guys were either fired or they were traitors to this country, right? See, they may have done something in their career that got them, some bars or some stars on their uniform. But, later on in life, once they became, Pentagon bureaucrats, they became part of the problem. It's like that Miley guy. He should be in Guantanamo. He was the guy who called the Chinese and said, oh, we'll let you know before we do anything. So how do we know half these other guys who are coming on these cable channels or major network channels doing their little speech? How do you know they haven't called Putin and said, oh, we'll call you? How do you know someone hasn't? Or Miley might have already called Putin, his counterpart. I wouldn't put it past that guy, right? Even Petraeus and all those guys. I'm sorry, and whoever these guys, these people that you see on TV, these so-called, they march out these generals. It's like, who knows what they've done, right? You don't think he was called and given the okay? I mean, you're not that naive, are you? You understand how this world works, okay? It's a corporatocracy, all right? That's not like, this isn't make-believe, all right? This isn't some joke, all right? The media and politicians are basically puppets of the corporatocracy. And the world is a corporatocracy, and the World Economic Forum is an organized crime syndicate that runs the corporatocracy, and that puppet, underneath the puppet, is you having your strings pulled if you don't understand this thing. So somebody called him and gave him the green light from the U.S., right? In consultation with NATO. They wanted this to happen. See, you don't understand. I'm going to end with this. And no one will have gotten to this point because I said I wasn't going to talk about it, but I'm just going to clarify it. I've said this once before. Ukraine bulges into Russia. Literally bulges. Down my thumb. See my thumb? Gee, you're dumb. My thumb is Crimea. Okay? This bulge includes, the eastern part of Ukraine, the so-called home of the separatists, right? But that bulges into Russia. And then up here, my middle finger, that's Russia too. And then there's Belarus or whatever. Right? Now, on the flip side, way over here, that's Europe. All right? And above there is Poland and other places. Well, what's happening is Putin said, we don't want this bulge. We want to flatten it out. Because we don't want you having three sides, to be inside, three side deep. So yeah, it was his thing, and he's been saying this since the Obama administration. People didn't listen to that, and that's why they went into Crimea to take out one of those sides. Besides, they were Russians. I don't care what anybody says. Crimea was Russia. All right, it was Russia. There was no resistance there. Okay, there were parades in the street. And there would have been parades in the street on Eastern Europe. But there's a game being played right now. See, that's the deal that the hotline should have been used for. Biden should have called and he should have said it. He should have said, we've got two ways of doing this. I would prefer you had elections in the eastern part of Ukraine to see if they wanted to be, if the so-called separatist area is truly Russian, right? If these are truly Russians, culturally Russians, people who want to be part of Russia, Russian-speaking, Russian heritage, etc. And if that is the case, and there's elections, and that comes out to that, and then that there's an organized exodus by anyone who doesn't want to be a part of Russia. Okay? And that the U.S. would help provide funds or whatever. That's what I would have done. And if not, or whatever, and if they couldn't negotiate that, say, okay, well then that's to draw the line there. And so this is the EU, this is Russia. And that's what this is all about. And people don't understand that. But instead, they got these crazy threats and NATO and this, that, the other, and now they're trying to create. There's not going to be World War III. See, there's no such thing as World War III. You can't have a nuclear war. You can't even have a limited nuclear war. Nuclear weapons are toxic. Don't you understand that? And then it causes escalation, and one thing leads to another. And then once you let the so-called nuclear genie out of the bottle, what happens when China goes for Taiwan, which they're eventually going to go? So then that opens the thing. Okay, well, we'll use limited nukes against the Chinese in Taiwan. You see? To prevent them from going into Taiwan. And so they'll nuke all that water and down in the Southeast Asia. Because they probably won't nuke Taiwan because they don't want to destroy Taiwan. So they'll nuke the battle cruisers and stuff like that, or something, wherever the theater of war is. Maybe those islands they built in the South China Sea, so-called South China Sea. China built these, basically it's a place to wage war from. And to prevent, have a base of operations to prevent, U.S. Navy, from coming in, right? People don't get it. Socioeconomic geopolitics. Learn it, know it, live by it. And my advice to you is turn off the frickin' TV. Think positive. Get your house in order. Live your life and be happy. And you say, oh, but these people over there. Forget it. There's more people dying here than there are in Ukraine right now. This past weekend, more people probably died in the United States collectively, through murders and diseases. All right. I'm not talking about that plague that they just won't give us the frickin' pill. They promised to give us a fucking antiviral pill in January. Remember? December they said that? They were going to give us a pill for it. Right? What happened to it? It's, tomorrow's March. No, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about people, 650,000 people a year dying from heart-related problems, 600-some thousand people dying from cancer, people dying from kidney disease, right? Diabetes, type 2 diabetes, right? Pneumonia, the basic good old flu. Who knows what the flu is, right? Remember that time a year ago in Britain? They had no cases of flu, but they had a lot of cases of other thing. But there were nobody had the flu that year. It's like, wait a second, man. You mean nobody had the flu? Well, anyway, here, and then people commit suicide. More people commit suicide in the U.S. in 1 year than will ever die in this crazy Ukrainian, Russian, socioeconomic, geopolitical move. All right? Board game move. So wake up. So demand of your so-called leaders, your cult of personality leaders, some common sense about health and crime. And let's not forget about inflation. The price of things has gone anywhere from 25 to 100%. What about that? That's unsustainable. So, we've got rampant crime, runaway inflation, all right? Disease that's completely out of control, right? Several million people dying every year of diseases, close to 100-some thousand people being murdered. Do you see what I mean? This is what they're hiding from you. This is one of the reasons why somebody here gave the okay to Putin to do that. As a diversion. Wake up to the real world. Everything you know is wrong. You don't know what you don't know. All right? And my answer is, it's like this shirt I have up here that I was wearing before, that hoodie. That was the hoodie I was wearing, the same one the girl's wearing. Then what? So you watch this news, you're playing armchair general, whatever happens, happens. Then what? You're still stuck with the following. High crime, runaway inflation, okay? We're no longer energy independent. We can't produce it from windmills that are starting to just fall apart because they've outlived themselves and no one has chain of custody, so nobody wants to fix the fuckers, right? Solar panel can't handle it. We have limited dams where they could produce hydroelectric. So when you drive your electric car and think you're being green, it's running on coal and gas, no matter you like it or not. And eventually it's going to be running on gas that we import from the Middle East. Right? And everyone went out and bought SUVs. They hired all these people to work for the IRS. So wait till you see your taxes go up because the price of housing has gone up. Do you know why the price of housing's gone way up? So that they could do reassessment next year, and then your taxes are going to go through the roof. That's another reason why I bought a cheap house, is you can reassess this all you want to. It's a piece of crap. The roof is leaking. So when the assessment guy comes here, he tries to write a high number. I'm going to say, come on upstairs. Let me show you something. All right? You're telling me this house is worth more money than I paid for it? Look at this. Right? What are you talking about? You think this house is worth more money? Do you have to do that in your third floor to keep water from landing on your bedroom? In your bed? Yeah. So, some got it bad, some got it worse, but I'll tell you, we're all in shit creek, all right? We're up the legendary tributary without any means of transportation, and you're being glued to the TV watching war. Picking a side, team red, team blue. We got midterm elections. We got let me see, write my check, get my credit card out. I got to donate. Yeah, all you're doing is paying the salaries of the announcers on TV. And what are the announcers on TV doing? Dividing people. Screw that. My message to BLM, Antifa, and all you other people out there. Peace and love, man. Just give it up, Nobody cares about, we don't hate anybody. That's all a make-believe thing. And if you believe that, you're misguided. You're misguided. You're mistaken. I was around during Martin Luther King. I was down in D.C., on the mall. Right? You don't get it. That stuff happened before maybe your grandparents were even born, but certainly before your parents were born. The civil rights movement was over. Feminist movement was over, ended. Vietnam War ended. By the mid-'70s, that stuff was all over. And then we were in happy times by the end of the 70s. Everybody was talking about peace, love, and having fun. It wasn't the 60s. It weren't the hippies. The hippies are fuckers. The hippies are the yuppies who are now the old fogies who are supporting all this crap. Right? They're the ones that sold out America. The hippies. They became yuppies. It's the people who came out of the late 70s, right, that were the ones who, knew what it was like to be happy and were, and free and didn't have prejudice and didn't have all these things. And yeah, there's always going to be some wacko out there, whack job. Okay? But they're such a small minority of people. There's 330 million people in this country. And you could probably, and as far as people who are filled with hate, they're like CO2 in the atmosphere. Like I say, 99.9% of the Earth's atmosphere is 78% nitrogen, 21% oxygen, and 0.9% argon. So 99% of the Earth's atmosphere is nitrogen, oxygen, and argon. And you're going, say what? Well, where's the CO2? Oh, there's some CO2 and there's some methane and water vapor, but they're like trace gases. 99% of the Earth's atmosphere is not CO2. 99% of the people in the United States did not die from that disease that's been around for a couple of years. And believe me, 99.9% plus people in this country aren't bigots, racist, or any kind of weird thing like that. So get it through your thick skulls. It's just a media hypocrisy. It's just a bunch of people. It's hypocrisy for profit, pretending this stuff because they're trying to sell commercials, man. They're trying to keep you tuned in during the commercial breaks. And you go, well, I don't buy that stuff anyway. The point is they get the views, and I was a general manager of a radio station. By you being there, having the TV on, I don't care if you're in there making a sandwich. The fact that you've kept that stupid station on during the commercial break, all right, is giving them a higher percentage of revenue for that advertisement. In other words, enriching them. And then when you donate $25 to a political campaign on your credit card, even $5, all right, that money's going to those same media people who are like basically putting money behind and pushing and promoting this divisiveness that 99% of the people in this country don't give a flying fuck about. Wake up to reality, man. Anyway, good luck. Peace. Right? Peace. Turn off the frickin' TV, man. Peace. Do anything but that. And take care of you and yours and think of love, happiness, whatever. And if you want to get behind something, try to call people out, and your doctors and nutritionists and other people, to give us some facts about food and nutrition, because we are what we eat, man. And look, I don't care how young, if young you are or how old you are, but at some point it's going to catch up with you. And, most of the stuff that we think is okay isn't okay, and it's going to cause you some kind of thing, unless you happen to just be lucky. There are people who are lucky out there. It's not karma, right? To all you new agers, it's not karma. All right? It's luck. I've seen people who have been like Mother Teresa get stricken down with stuff. Never did a thing in their life but good deeds. All right? And lived a good life. Right? Or what about a child born with, some horrible disease? What'd that kid do? I mean, you can say, well, in another life, come on, man. Get with it. The people who are out there are lucky. The rest of us, we're not so lucky. And a guy like me, I've had some bad luck. But you got to think positive. And yes, I'm still going to realize energy into matter and think positive. And I'm asking you to pray or meditate and think positive for me, because I have some health issues and stuff. And I've got problems with my roof. And I would appreciate your putting your energy into it. It doesn't have to be religious, spiritual, whatever. Just even kind thoughts. I'd appreciate it. Thank you. I'll talk to you tomorrow. By the way, before I do that, don't forget my site's ROCKFLUX. And if they take me off here, I'll be on Rumble. I'm on Rumble already. And great solar stuff in case you want to, in case there's a minor problem with the grid. Some of that stuff will help you out. It's not just solar stuff. It's power backup. And there's my books and stuff like that. The links to all my stuff's on ROCKFLUX. Take care. Peace.